And we will be having our singing night unless there's a change in there, and I don't anticipate that. But in just a moment, we'll have our song. We'll have an opening prayer, be by Brother Herbert, and we'll be getting started with our lesson. I don't have any updates, Scott. If you may have someone that we need to update on, I don't have any updates given to me at this time. So at this time, we'll get started with 436.
The funeral service for Kina's Ain't by Marriage will be tomorrow, Kenny, over at Belmont, I believe. Is it Belmont, Jeremy?
Yes.
At the funeral home? Yeah, the funeral home.
New Bethel.
Oh, at New Bethel?
New Bethel.
Yes, it's at New Bethel.
Okay.
I've a home prepared where the saints abide, just over in the glory land. And I long to be by my Savior's side, just over in the glory land. Just over in the glory land, I'll join the happy angel band. Just over in the glory land, just over in the glory land, there with the mighty host I'll stand. Just over in the glory land, with the blood washed throng I will shout and sing. Just over in the glory land, battles as to Christ the Lord and King. Just over in the glory land, just over in the glory land, I'll join the happy angel band. Just over in the glory land, just over in the glory land, there with the mighty host I'll stand. Just over in the glory land.
Our dear Father in heaven, we thank Thee for this opportunity to assemble here tonight, so we can read and study Your holy word and sing songs of praise on the day. And Father, be with us as we do so, that we'll be pleasing in Thy sight. Father, we're thankful for this day and for the blessings that You gave us this day. Thank You for life itself, Father. And Father, thank Thee for Your greatest blessing of all, Your Son Jesus, that You sent to die upon the cross for each of us. And Father, we thank Thee for the great hope of heaven that we have through Him and through our needs. We thank Thee for Your church and for giving us your teach us the opportunity to be a part of it. And Father, we are mindful of those who are numbered that are sick. Please be with them, bless and comfort them, and be with their caregivers. And Father, also within our community, be with those that are sick also. Father, we are thankful for many physical blessings we enjoy, home, food, clothing, friends, loved ones, many things that we have from day to day. Now, please go with us, Father, through this study. And like His over, please say, in Christ's name we pray. Amen.
Well, we're still on Lesson 8. We lacked a little bit getting through with Lesson 8, and I'm going to finish that tonight, hopefully, fairly quick, and then we're going to try to get into Lesson 9 as we do that. Now, all this, if you're keeping up, is all this is not stopping. It's actually, it is a detailed of what happened with the children of Israel as they lived enslaved in Egypt, and then they were reluctantly let go. But their trials are not over yet. And one thing that I think I brought this up last week, and I thought a lot about this, is when you take a group of people that have been enslaved that long, who depend upon somebody really to wake them up, feed them, and put them to bed, tell them how much to work, and really stress them into their daily lives, they're really dependent upon that host, whoever that is. We see this not only in enslaved people, we see this in a prison system, we see it. So there's some things to be said here about a group of people that really can't think for themselves, but they can complain and they murmur. We've talked a little bit about that, and that's going to continue to go on as we study all through these next few chapters. So I'm going to review just a little bit. So what I want to do, and I stopped on page 47, lesson 8, but I'm going to back up just a little bit because I want to point something out that I thought was a very important point. We are seeing right now the children of Israel backs against a wall. They're pinned against the Red Sea. You got Pharaoh who thinks they don't know what they're doing. They've kind of strayed and back and forth, and really it didn't make sense in his mind, his human mind. It didn't make sense of why they travel the way they travel, and he feels like they've done something real stupid. They've won against that Red Sea, and it's easy pickings for them, his 600 chariots, his well-supplied army. Just go in and slay them. That's what he's thought. He's going to get revenge. If he can't have them, I guess he's going to take them back. And I said this last week, it was like when they woke up one morning and said, "Why did we let them go?" And I told you there was probably 10 good reasons why he let them go. They couldn't see too far down the road because of all the things he had been through and what God had done and how he had showed them that they were going to be released. So here's our setting at this point, and I'm on 46, and I want to point this out. It says, note verse 13 of chapter 14, verse 13 of Exodus, said, and it said, "And Moses said unto the people of Israel," because remember, they lifted up their eyes and they saw Pharaoh coming. And in their mind, we are doomed. They're scared. They really want to run, but there's nowhere to run. And here's what Moses tells us. There's 3 things I want you to notice here. Fear not. I brought this out last week. He said, "Fear not, be not afraid. Fear something your enemies can detect." I have read this somewhere. Deer hunters will point this out. When you're setting up in a tree stand and that heart gets to racing, you actually will exhale. There are certain chemicals you exhale that an animal picks up on. Whether it's a deer, whether it's a dog, whatever it is, they can pick up on that chemical, that ballast that comes out of your mouth, because you're expiring something that's not normal. And so they pick up on it, whether it's fear, human, whatever it is. Well, people do the same thing. I'm talking about recognize when you are scared, you are ready to run, and they pick up on it pretty quick. And so look what Moses told them. Fear not. In other words, don't be afraid. God got us up to this point. He didn't leave us here in the desert to die. He didn't bring us all the way out here to die, because that's what they're saying. Why have you brought us out to die? So fear not. But look at the second thing he said. Stand still. Don't run. The worst thing you can do sometimes, and they'll tell you this, if you're approached by an animal, is turn and run, because they will chase you. That's the first sign that they know that you're retreating. So he said, stand still. And then look at the third thing. It says, see the salvation of the Lord. And he's telling them, he said, if you keep reading on that verse, and it goes on down there, he says, you're not going to see the Egyptians anymore after this day. He's telling them, God has taken care of you. God will surely do this. Now, I don't think Moses at this point really knew what was going to happen, but he had that confidence. He had the faith, as a leader should, that this is what's going to happen. And if you'll notice in the next few verses, even God kind of chastises Moses here. Look at verse 15, and it says, And the Lord said unto Moses, Wherefore criest thou unto me? Speak unto the children of Israel, that they may go forward. He's asking, says, why are you crying out to me? Just do it. Up to this point, if you remember, all he had to do is raise the rod or stretch his hand forth with the rod, and whatever he wanted to do, it happened. Well, we know what he did do, and what God told him to do is stretch forth the hand over the sea, and of course it will part. And that he told him that, and he said, verse 16 says, But lift up thy rod, stretch forth thy hand over the sea, and divide it, and the children of Israel will go on dry ground. Now, again, I don't think they had any idea. I don't think Moses had any idea where they were going to escape from. He just knew they were going to get out of it. And it would have been, it's a miraculous thing to part the sea and walk through on dry ground. Who would have thought that was going to happen? I wouldn't have. Like they probably didn't know. But you also notice, if you remember, that there's an angel that had been following them and with them the whole time. He's been guiding them by day and by night. And we're going to notice something just in a little bit. If you'll notice, turn to page 47. What happens to the angel as they begin to move through. And look at verse 19. And the angel of God, which went before the camp of Israel, removed and went behind them. Now remember, the army's behind them. They've got them pinned in. There's going to be a strong east wind that's going to blow all night long. It's going to blow to the point it's going to part the sea. And here you have the angel that's in front of them now moving behind us, which is going to give us light that we can see, but it's going to give total darkness to Pharaoh's army. And it's going to separate them, what it's going to do. And so we were getting very close to where we picked up on 21, but it says, look at 20, and it came between the camp of Egyptians and the camp of Israel, and it was a cloud and darkness to them, but it gave light by night to thee, so that the one came not near the other all night. And so we're seeing this as an angel of light, but also it's a cloud. It tells us there that became darkness to Pharaoh. So what we're beginning to see is God is in total control. These are His children, even though they murmur, but He's going to take care of where this. Later on we're going to see actually feeding them by morning and by evening, but He's also giving them a way to escape here. And let's see what it happens and what it does to them. Look at verse 21. And Moses stretched out his hand over the sea, and the Lord caused the sea to go back by a strong wind all night, and made the sea dry in the land, and the waters were divided. Verse 22, And the children of Israel went into the midst of the sea upon dry ground, and the waters were a wall unto them on the right hand and on their left. Now I want you to notice in verse 21, Moses stretched out his hand over the sea, and a strong wind blew all night long. That would be, first thing, if you remember, they were traveling east, so it had to be blowing into them pretty much all night long. But it was enough to divide the sea. It wasn't a shallow sea. I read some commentary where some say, well, you know, it could have been a reed sea, it could have been a shallow sea. There's no way it could have been a shallow sea, not to have the walls of water on the right and on the left. And in our book, I think I showed you the map there. If you have your book, you can look. It shows you a potential crossing of where they thought they crossed. I don't know where they crossed. It's irrelevant. We just know they crossed. The Bible tells us that they crossed, and we know they crossed on dry land. For me, if I'm sitting on the other side, and of course they can't see this now, Pharaoh can't see that. Obviously they can't see what's happened. But they do begin to follow after. Now, we're talking, I don't know the number, what numbers I can get, probably 1 million plus people is traveling across a gape in the ocean and I don't know how wide it was. It's irrelevant at that point. 1 million people had to cross through by daybreak. So I don't anticipate being a wide crossing, but it had to be wide. I'm talking about a wide crossing across the sea, but it had to be wide enough because when the Pharaoh, we see, begins to chase, he gets in there and, of course, bad things happen. So let's look on. Look at verse 23. And the Egyptians pursued and went in after the midst of the sea and all of Pharaoh's horses and chariots and horsemen. 24. And it came to pass that in the morning watch, the Lord, I thought this was powerful to me when I read this, looked the host of Egyptians through the pillar of fire of the cloud and troubled the host of the Egyptians. It tells me the cloud is still there, separating the Egyptians from the Pharaoh's army, and they are traveling, obviously, following after him, and God looks through them. He looks through the pillar of fire, and you're going to notice what he does. With all the chariots that they had, probably top-notch chariots, he does something to the wheels. The wheels, and it use the word drave, but basically saying the wheels won't turn. Whether they're wobbling, whether they're coming off, whatever they're doing, the wheels of the chariot have a problem. Let's read on. Verse 25, and took off their chariot wheels, and they drave them heavily. So the Egyptians said, let us flee from the face of Israel, for the Lord fighteth for them against the Egyptians. What was your first clue? In my mind, I thought, you just now recognize this. The people have seen this back in Egypt the whole time. And now it really set in, we have really messed up here. We went off into this sea, walls of water on either side, our wheels won't go, we can't get the horses to pull it, and we're stuck in the middle of this sea. Look at verse 26. And the Lord said unto Moses, stretch out thy hand over the sea, that the waters may come again upon the Egyptians, and upon their chariots, and upon their horsemen. Verse 27, and Moses stretched forth his hand over the sea, and the sea returned to its strength when the morning appeared. And the best I can understand, this is daybreak, when they finally could see what was going on. The Egyptians fled against it, and the Lord overthrew the Egyptians in the midst of the sea. Now remember what he told them. When the three things he told them, you will not see them. Now remember, that was in the evening. At some point, before they began to cross, he said, you won't see them anymore. This is it for them. Had no idea what was going to happen. I'm sure Moses didn't know, but I'm sure he knew something was going to happen. Look at verse 28. And the waters returned and covered the chariots and the horsemen and all the host of Pharaoh that came into the sea after them. And there remained not so much as one of them. In other words, not one of them. Every one had perished. Because you can imagine all the armor they had on, everything that they had with them. When the water came in, there's no getting out of it. It more or less crushed them, I'm assuming. A few things I want to point out here. The Egyptians pursued the children as the waters divided. It might be interesting, in verse 24 states that about daybreak, God looks through the pillar of fire. And I thought that was important. I pointed out that a while ago. It was like God was leading them into that trap. You know, a lot of times, if you want to trap a dog or a cat or whatever and it's loose and you need to get it in a cage, you just give it something and entice it on in. To me, that's what appeared and I thought was happening the whole time. God's just luring them in. He said he's going to prove his point to Pharaoh that he was God. Pharaoh, to my knowledge, never recognized that. He recognized that this was a God and he had sinned. He had said that back earlier, if you remember, on the plagues. He knew enough. But in my mind, I think he knew enough. But I don't think he really knew he was all-powerful God. If he had, he wouldn't have done this. So, look at verse 29. And the children of Israel walked upon dry land in the midst of the sea and the walls of water. I thought that was an important point I want to bring out. Important point. Can you imagine if you walked into the sea and just see a wall of water right and left? Possibly, I don't know that this is true, possibly you could see the animals, the fish in the sea. Because you're walking like it would be like in a glass. If some of you have been so many places, aquariums where you walk through the glass, that's in my mind. I don't know what it looked like. But it would be, to me, miraculous to be able to do that. If I hadn't saw all the things up to this point, but I saw this, you have to know somebody is taking care of you. And we'll see that just in a minute. Look at verse 30. Thus said the Lord, save Israel that day out of the hand of the Egyptians. And Israel saw the Egyptians dead upon the shore. They can see them as they washed up. And look at verse 31. And Israel saw this great work which the Lord did upon the Egyptians, and the people feared the Lord and believed the Lord and his servant Moses. I think that was a very important point there, that they believed. They've been talking about it all this time. They talked about God and the God of their forefathers, and they have not seen God. But you got to see, they actually was seeing a lot of the evidence that what God did. The pillar of fire by the angels. This is something to behold that we, of course, we don't see that today. It's not for us. We've got the word that's been given to us. They didn't have it. They had Moses. They had their forefathers, the scriptures that they had, but they actually got to see firsthand what had happened.
Hey, Kenny,
Yes, sir.
scholars estimate about 2 to 3 million people crossed.
I said safely 1 million because it told.
That's just people. Animals also crossed.
Yes, sir. I don't know.
I mean, it was not just a few feet. It was a wide opening.
And that's what I kept, as I read about this, how wide we're talking. First of all, how wide was the water, the gate? I don't know. Then how far did they have to travel? That many people? I don't know.
What I think about is, it had to be pretty deep and wide for them to get all of the Egyptians in there.
Yes.
And kill
Yes.
them.
Yes.
Yeah, I thought about, even though there were about 600 of them, but it was 600 of their horses. And now it says 600 of the finest, and all of them. So they may have been more than 600. Yes, Brother Jim.
Let's keep in mind the hand of God in all of this.
Yep.
We see this through human eyes, that God is taking care of these people. And in order to take care of his people, he's got to destroy that entire army.
Exactly.
And we can imagine all sorts of things in our mind, but God is going to take care of all of these. And you just think about, I think Brother Scott said something about 2 or 3, 5 million people. That's a lot of people.
That's a lot of people.
A lot of people, and I don't know how wide the sea is, as far as the body of water is concerned, but apparently there's enough, God made room for those people to drown in the sea.
And where I'm.
Chapter 15, verse 8 describes the waters as congealed.
Yes, sir.
And so you just got to imagine how it must have looked, how the water's in that congealed state.
See, that's what I would imagine when I read all that. As you walked in there, the congealed effect. But you talk about that many people. The width of it, I don't know. The length of it, I don't know. Doesn't matter what it was. We just know it was. And it was enough water above them. Is when it came down, it crushed and killed everybody in there. So it had to be a large wall of water.
Another interesting point is this, again, I don't be quiet there.
No, that's fine.
But notice when the Israelites were saved.
Notice when they were what?
When were the Israelites saved?
When they were saved?
When were they saved in that episode? When they crossed over the sea.
Yes, sir.
Not halfway, not three-quarter way, all the way across.
Yes, sir. And that's what it points out here in the writing. I think when you read through this, as it crossed over. And I'm going to point something out just in a minute as I start my next lesson. But the point, when I...
One other thing. Most people have not been on the ocean. Get in the middle of the ocean, you can't see nothing. Water, 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 water. And the waves get so boisterous that those big ships, you look out the window and you see a hole in it. But I can personally understand more what these people went through there and by crossing the sea 2 times. And
Yes,
seeing
sir.
all that water, as far as you can see, nothing but water. And then think about God putting his hand in the matter and just open it up, and all these people drowning in that sea.
When you were speaking about that, in my mind as you're talking about that, we think about how many times God used the water to teach a lesson. There's a lot of things as we read back in the Bible, and because we know it's 80% of our earth, but God did use water a lot, and of course water is essential for us, isn't it? He's still using water today. But anyway, I don't want to get off too far off, but I want you to notice that, and Scott brought this out, when they got on the other side and they saw what had happened, daybreak came, they was able to look over there and look at the shoreline and see the dead bodies of everything. And God had saved them. That's what the point Scott brought up, God had saved them. And they were rejoicing. And we're going to notice something as we begin Lesson 9 just in a moment. So if you would, let's pick up, and we're on Lesson 9. It's going to really flow right into from 8 to 9. So if you've got your sheet, anybody not have a sheet for Lesson 9? We had those passed out. So a few things that I want to point out at the top. It says, looking back in Lesson 8, the children of Israel left Egypt a free people. You know, I told you how when they left, how did they leave? With boldness. Because they saw what had happened. But you know, it didn't take long, even though they had that confidence and felt like Moses was the guy that was leading them. But they were murmuring not too far down the road. And that's going to be something that we're going to see that's going to be a continuing thing, the murmuring, as we call it, an automatopoeia. You know, we talked about that last week, what a word automatopoeia means. You remember, Alan? It's whatever it sounds, that's what it is. Like murmuring, that's what it is. Like if you hear a buzzing sound, the bee, the buzzing, that's what a word it's called automatopoeia. The writer brought that out. I thought that was kind of neat that they did that. But anyway, God made a promise, and he kept his promise. He was going to, for hundreds of years, nothing was said, but God had always remembered, if you remember, the Israelite nation. They were enslaved. He was going to free them, and not only just free them, but the promise was to give them the land of milk and honey. And it's not going to be, if you've read any of this, it's not going to be quick, is it? Nothing he does is on our timetable. It's on God's timetable. And we've seen that so far. So we know he's got a promise of milk and honey, but they're now a free nation. If you remember too, I said, you know, it didn't make sense to Pharaoh at the time. Why didn't they just take another route? Because God knew they weren't prepared to fight anybody. We're going to see that coming up pretty quick. They're going to need some help when they do meet adversity and meet a nation like the Amalekites. I can't even get it out. So it says, after studying in Lesson 9, we'll take chapters 15 and 16 of Exodus. And that's what we're going to do tonight. We're going to be looking at 15 and 16 as we go through this. It says, now remember, you've got the children across the Red Sea on the other side, and look what's happened. Let's look at verse 1. They sang, Moses and the children of Israel sang songs unto the Lord, and spake, saying, I will sing the song of the Lord, for he hath triumphed gloriously. The horse and the rider hath thrown into the sea. And we're going to be several passages seeing this is part of their song. So if you would, get your songbook. And Alan won't sing it, but he's going to make me lead it. So we're going to 157. I thought this was appropriate at the time. On Jordan's stormy banks I stand. Unless Will or Jack wants to lead it. Okay. On Jordan's stormy banks I stand and cast a wishful eye to Canaan's fair and happy land, where my possessions lie. We will rest in the fair and happy land by and by, just across on the ever-green shore. Sing the song of Moses and the Lamb by and by, and dwell with Jesus evermore. Fill with delight my raptured soul, here no longer stay. Through Jordan waves around me roll, fearless I launch away. We will rest in the fair and happy land by and by, just across on the evergreen shore. Sing the song of Moses and the Lamb by and by, and dwell with Jesus evermore. That song has been on my mind ever since I started studying this lesson. I don't know why, but it has been. So I actually approached Ralph, and we tried to figure out which one it was because it's on my mind. I just didn't know the name of it. I even went to Alan. We tried. So I stopped Scott. He said 157. I said, well, I didn't know. I didn't know where it was. I can't. But anyway, I thought that was appropriate. So what we are going to do is 15 and 16. I think it's very appropriate. I am going to go down through there just a little bit. I'm not going to sing or recite every one of the verses, because if you'll look, 1 through 9, it talks about what happened. They're singing a song. Moses and the children are singing this song of what happened, how God saved them. And they're rejoicing. They are rejoicing. They've actually seen what God can do, and they know that they're the chosen people at this point. And so, all the way down through 9, and look at verse 9, it says, the enemy said, I will pursue, I will overtake, I will divide the spoil. My lust shall be satisfied upon them. I shall draw my sword, my hand shall destroy them. You know, didn't happen, did it? Didn't happen. So we see what actually did happen. Now, the children of Israel were singing and rejoicing because of the miraculous thing that had been done. Now, we're going to look at Exodus 15, chapter 15, verse 20-21, and look what happened. And then Miriam, the name Miriam is brought up. Now, Miriam is the sister to Aaron and Moses. And it says, the prophetess, the sister of Aaron, took a timbrel in her hand, and all the women went out after her with the timbrels and with dances. And 21 says, with Miriam answered them, saying, ye to the Lord, for he hath triumphed gloriously, and the horse and the rider had been thrown into the sea. Now, I thought it's appropriate that everybody sang their songs. They were giving praises unto God. They couldn't be happier. They saw what happened. But look on page 48. It says, note what the analogy this writer of the book brings out in the passage above of the deliverance of Egypt from bondage and the salvation of individuals. So now let's look at John 3:16. What about this today? How does this apply to us today? I've got something underlined there. Saved by grace through faith, not of works. It sure wasn't by works the children of Israel were saved, was it? Because they fought the whole time. They fought them tooth and nail. It was only by the grace of God, of what He had done for them, and the faith even Moses and Aaron had that is going to happen. John 3:16 says, "For God so loved the world that He gave His only begotten Son, that whosoever believeth in Him should not perish, but have everlasting life." Look, Ephesians 2:8, "For by grace are you saved through faith, and not of yourself." We can't do it by ourselves. You can't do it by yourself. Look at verse 2 and 9 now, Ephesians 2:9. "Not of works, lest any man shall boast." And look at the next heading, "Faith without works is dead." James 2:14 says, "What doth it profit, my brethren, that a man, though a man say he hath faith and have not works, can faith save him?" James 2:15, "If a brother or sister is naked, be naked, and be destitute of daily food." And 16 says, "And one of you say unto him, Depart in peace, ye be warmed and filled, notwithstanding ye give them not those things which are needful to the body. And doeth it what doth it profit?" And then look at 17. Even so faith, it hath not works, is dead, alone, being alone. And 18, yes, a man may say that hath faith, and I have works. Show me thy faith without thy works, and I will show you thee my faith by thy works. Now, up to this point, what the point is being made, there's things that you got to do. Now, Old Testament, that's been fulfilled. We're talking about now. What are we living under? The new covenant. Well, there's certain things you've got to do. Of course, you've got to, first of all, we talked about this. I think I've heard Scott do this about every lesson, all the lessons, I'm sure. The things you've got to do to be saved. As James pointed out here, says, you be naked and destitute, and you give them not what they need. What good is that? So there's several points that was made there. I'm going to read on just a little bit because I'm going to have to pull it to a close. In verse 19, "Thou believest that there is one God, and doest well. The devil also believe and tremble." I thought that was very powerful. The devil is also believing. Just because I believe, that may not do. Do you think that the Pharaoh believed that this was a God? I think he believed it. I don't think he believed it enough. I think he believed it. Just believing's not getting there. In James 2:20, "But with thou, O man, O vain man, that faith without works is dead." And 21, "Was not Abraham and our fathers justified by works when he had offered Isaac his son upon the altar?" And then James 2:22, "Seest thou faith wrought with works, and thy works was faith made perfect." And 23, "And the scripture was fulfilled, which said, Abraham believed God, that it was imputed upon him for righteousness, that he was called the friend of God." A lot of things there to look at. In today's world, we know what we got to do. Matter of fact, I'm going to ask Brother Jim to come up after we do our song invitation, and he's going to offer that. He's going to tell you what you've got to do if you're lost and outside, or if you have been but you missed out and you've sinned in public, and what you must do to do that. So, with that being said, we're going to stop there on the bottom of 48, and we're going to pick up there. Now, as I said, January 11th, I believe, is our singing night. So it'll be, the 18th, am I right? January the 18th, we'll be back and try to finish these songs. I think Alan will have a song, and he'll call on somebody to pray afterwards. Number 10. If you would, get your songbooks out. Number 10. Sorry.
The Savior says, come, the cross where He died is inside. And now at the cross there is room. Are you coming to Jesus tonight? Are you coming to Jesus tonight? Are you coming to Jesus tonight? The bride and the Spirit invite. Are you coming to Jesus tonight? Oh, who to himself will be true, of all whom these voices invite, who answers, my brother, do you? Are you coming to Jesus tonight? Are you coming to Jesus tonight? Are you coming to Jesus tonight? The bride and the Spirit invite. Are you coming to Jesus tonight? I got a little head of Jim.
That's old age.
That's what I said a while ago.
That's what I heard a while ago. That's what I said.
We've had the invitation of something. We need to realize that the invitation of our Lord is really never closed. And we are a people of His, and as a people, the avenue of prayer is open to us. We sometimes just take for granted that these things will happen, but the avenue of prayer is open, and it is very powerful. I think about the folks that are sick, and I think about the times in which they have called upon the name of the Lord, and God has helped them through medicine. And I think about the world that we live in, lost in sin. And they can call upon the name of the Lord through Jesus Christ, the Son of God. We have the privilege of doing that. I'm thankful to the Lord that I live in a country where we have this freedom. And each of us need to recall and emphasize and be thankful to God for the freedoms that we do enjoy. And I appreciate so much the times that we have studied together and the times that we have called upon people, and then I see folks who are outside of Christ and come to Christ in obedience to the gospel of Christ. So we are thankful that we've had the opportunity tonight to come to Him and obey His blessed will. And we hope that each of us will continue to appreciate what God has done for us and how He supplies us with our needs. And so, at any time you have a need or you want to do something publicly, the people of God are ready and willing to assist you in that. And that is never closed. We may have finished the song, but let us realize it's not over. As long as we have the time, the opportunity, and the breath to obey our Lord. And keep that in mind as we go forth today.
And if you have a need to come forward, you can do so now. Or, like Brother Jim said, later. Scott's phone's always ready to answer, and he'll take care of it. Number 6 will be our closing song, and after we sing one verse, we'll ask Brother Scott to lead our closing prayer. Anywhere with Jesus I can safely go. Anywhere He leads me in this world below. Anywhere without Him there is joy's would fade. Anywhere with Jesus I am not afraid. Anywhere, fear I cannot know. Anywhere with Jesus I can safely go.
Our Father in heaven, we are thankful for this day and the opportunity to be here this evening, Father, and the great blessings of life bestowed upon us. With that here Bible class, Father, our teacher this evening, we apply the faith to our lives and resolve to serve Thee faithfully and realize that we must be as those of old, have no fear and always be courageous. We just need Thy salvation. I pray those people who are sick in various ways this evening, those who are weeping, and we pray they can be comforted. And Father, we thank You for all You've done for us, and bless us this evening through our future walks of life. In Christ's name we pray. Amen.
Amen.